All right, SEC fans, no fancy opening line. Georgia, Florida. What else do you need? We got David Waters on the line from Gators Breakdown to discuss this one as only he can. David, how you doing tonight?
Good, Mark. For the Gator side, you have to call it Florida, Georgia. So.
Oh, that's right. I've made that mistake, and you are quick to correct me. And it does make sense alphabetically, but of course,
if I didn't know, the Gator fans would let you hear about it in the comments. So.
they would, and they have. The Florida-Georgia game is coming up on Saturday, 3:30 Eastern time on CBS. Wow. You know, as college football fans, David, it's not the NBA, it's not baseball, it's not every day. We've got 365 days. We have 12 precious games, maybe 13, maybe 14, depending on how good the team does. So we've only got 13 or 14 of these. Then we really, if we root for a good team that's going to win most of its games, we really have like 2 or 3 of these that it's like, wow. Circle the calendar. I'm sure you've been thinking about this game since you stepped off that field versus Michigan after the big bowl win. It's Georgia, Florida, man. This is huge.
Absolutely, Mark. 2 years, Dan Mullen's been head coach. This is the second year, and back-to-back years we have this game as a top 10 matchup in the AP. And I believe I saw the stat. This is only the 7th time both teams have met when they're ranked in the AP top 10. So, look, this game has a lot of history, but it's not what it hasn't lived. It's not an Ohio State, Michigan as far as teams being ranked, very highly when they match up. There's a lot of animosity towards each other. Don't get me wrong, but I think this rivalry nationwide has just been more known as just a kind of a hateful, spiteful rivalry towards each other, not so much because both teams being very good. It's happened every now and then, but not to the level that it's happened the last 2 years, or go back to 2008 and 2012 when both teams were, really, really fighting for national supremacy. And that's what you have again here this year. And Dan Mullen's second year has really ramped up this rivalry since he's become head coach of Florida. And coming into the season, admittedly, I did too. I pegged Georgia as the SEC East champion, but still knew it would come down to this game in Jacksonville. And lo and behold, here we are, 8 weeks later, and Florida's actually the higher ranked team going into this game because of Georgia's loss to South Carolina, and Florida's kind of hard fought loss in Baton Rouge to LSU. So the tables have been turned a little bit, but for the narrative to change I think Florida to get another step in the direction of respect, Florida's going to have to beat Georgia on Saturday.
Take note, David, of the graphic. Florida, Georgia. There it is. We're all lined up for you. All right, Gators and Dogs, let's break it down. So you alluded to the offseason talk. You alluded to what's been built up by each program coming into this. Georgia expected to be an elite, maybe best team in the country, certainly top 3 to 4. Florida more in the we're still building. We had a great first season under Dan Mullen. We were a top 10 team last year. We're going to be in the top 10 to 15 by most analysts. But that Georgia was still decidedly the better team at this standpoint going into this season. But watching the two teams play, I think if you stripped off the names, the jerseys, and just watched them play and saw the results, this looks dead even to me.
Mark, I came into this season, and I go back to when preseason magazines came out, and you had Athlon and Lindy's and their All-American teams in their first team, second team, third team. And Florida was right up there with Alabama and Georgia for the number of players on those first, second, and third teams. Now, where, of course, it starts to fall off. And, of course, if you follow football long enough, if Florida's starting 22 on offense and defense are up there, they're pretty good. The depth is where, it could hurt Florida. But they've been able to overcome injuries. They've been able to overcome injuries to Felipe Franks, Jabari Zuniga, and Jonathan Grenard not playing out there. C.J. Henderson missing a few games. Kadarius Toney, missing a game as well. But I go back to those preseason magazines and say, okay, if Florida was to stay healthy, they could give Georgia a run for their money. And lo and behold, Florida gets hurt, and they're still giving Georgia a run for their money. And they get a lot of these injured players back who are going to be, who are going to be playing now on Saturday. So, you can say I think looking at these two teams coming into Saturday, they are about as close as you can get. Florida's trending up a little bit. Georgia has a lot of questions surrounding them right now. And look, Georgia's still a really, really good team. They averaged nearly 48 points in the first 5 games of the season. And the questions arise because they've only put up 38 total points in the last couple of games against South Carolina and Kentucky. So, they've got some things to figure out. The question I have for Georgia coming in this season is how would they replace their coordinators, especially on the offensive side of the ball. James Coley comes in, and it looks like at times he doesn't know what he wants to do on offense. You know what they should be doing. DeAndre Swift should be getting the ball, and they should be using that run game to their advantage even more. I know they have a lot of confidence in Jake Fromm. They should. He's one of the nation's best quarterbacks. But with a beat-up offensive line and a beat-up receiver core, that passing game for Georgia's taking a little bit of a hit. So there are times when you thought they should be able to line up in a 3rd and short situation and just blow the opposing team off the line, and they haven't been able to do that because of a beat-up offensive line. So there are some excuses for why Georgia doesn't look as good as we thought they would. The injuries caught up to them at receiver and offensive line. They still got one of the nation's best defenses. So, look, they had a blip on the radar when they played South Carolina. And as I said, as leading into this, it comes down to Saturday, and I expect nothing but Georgia's best on Saturday.
MarkRogersTV, the voice of college football, breaking down Florida and Georgia. The reason the way we do that is we bring on David Waters from Gators Breakdown. You can get my weekly college football predictions next to the voice of college football community link down in the description section below. 58% against the spread, but the purpose of the whole deal is to jump on there and get a whole lot of exclusive content there. David Waters from Gators Breakdown. Please join him on all the major audio platforms and here on YouTube as well. Yeah, you mentioned Georgia having some issues along the offensive front. That was expected to be one of the best in the nation. They're, I believe, leading the nation in number of sacks allowed. 3 of the 4 came against South Carolina, when Brown was pressured into some interceptions. The Florida defense leads the SEC in sacks and is near the top in disrupted plays behind the line of scrimmage. So let's start there with some big boy football being played in that matchup.
Absolutely, Mark. I mentioned DeAndre Swift, and he's the player right now that makes this Georgia offense click. 6.8 yards a carry on 110 attempts so far this year, with 7 touchdowns. And look, coming off a really good Kentucky game too, where he ran 21 times for 179 yards, averaged 8.5 yards a carry there. So, look, Florida's getting back Jabari Zuniga, Jonathan Grenard. That will help, even at defensive end. Florida still needs some beef up there in the middle, and they're going to need, David Reese and Amari Burney and that linebacker core to be, playing their best game with Swift, who can catch the ball out of the backfield. He can run to the outside. He can run inside. He's the all-around back, one of the nation's best running backs, and Florida's going to have their hands full. I mean, Florida, if you look at their stats, Mark, look okay in stopping the run, 124 yards a game in the SEC, and that's 4th in the SEC. But in the last 2 games, Mark, they've given up 435 yards of rushing to LSU and South Carolina. 218 to LSU and 217 to South Carolina. So that's got to change. If Georgia runs for over 200 yards, they're going to win this game. Florida can get a little bit of a shootout just because of the offense and the way it's changed with Kyle Trask. But if DeAndre Swift and this Georgia offense is rushing for over 200 yards, it's going to be tough for this Florida offense to stay on the field and beat this team that can run up and down the field on you. So, as I said, getting back Grenard, getting back Zuniga will really help. You kind of saw where, in 2 of the better running offenses so far this year in Kentucky and Auburn. Florida held Kentucky to 140 and Auburn to 124. That's the kind of performance Florida's going to need this coming up weekend against Georgia, as well as stopping the run.
Yeah, and Georgia, even more so than most teams, you can go to that rushing stat with just about any team in the country, and if you're able to run the ball, then you can control the passing game. You take the heat off the defense. You limit those pass rushers. They can't pin their ears back. You're not playing behind the sticks. You're playing from in front in regards to the score. You're not throwing the ball 51 times like Jake Fromm did against South Carolina. It all adds up in terms of statistics, but Georgia's probably even more so of an outlier. 41-0 since 2017 when they run for at least 4.1 yards per carry. When they're under that mark, David, they're 0-6.
There you go.
If you can control the ground game against Georgia, against anybody, but specifically Georgia, because they want to run it 70% of the time, then you're going to be in good shape.
And Mark, to extend that before we go, I mean, Jake Fromm, you know, it's like, as you said, if he throws the ball near 50 times or whatever, but if you get him in 3rd and long, I think this year with Coley and with that receiver core that has changed so much. I mean, look, he killed Florida last year on 3rd downs. Florida got him in very favorable 3rd and long situations. But with CJ Henderson got hurt that game. They were already without Marco Wilson. So they were able, you know, Georgia and Fromm were able to pick on CJ McWilliams, but Florida got Fromm in favorable 3rd and long situations last year, but Fromm was, you know, bounced off that LSU game last year and then had a bye week, played one of the best games of his career last year versus Florida, to have a bye week again. But I still think with Coley at OC and then this wide receiver core, if you get Fromm in 3rd and long situations this year and Zuniga and Grenard are near 100%, I really, really like Florida's chances there this year.
Talking Florida, Georgia with David Waters from Gators Breakdown. Please join him here on YouTube and also on the major audio platforms of your choice. Monty Rice, Tate Crowder, and that bunch at Georgia. Match them up against Florida, and what you think the keys are going to be with your elite wide receiver core, and obviously LaMichael P. Ryan and company with Kyle Trask running the show.
And that's what it's going to be, Mark. It's going to be Kyle Trask throwing the ball and throwing the ball down the field. That's what Florida needs to do. You saw some success of South Carolina and Ryan Helinski being able to test this Georgia defensive backfield before he went down with injury. He was 15 of 20 for 116 yards before he got hurt. You know, and then Georgia's had some favorable quarterback opposition leading up to that point. As I said, Helinski goes down. South Carolina's basically playing with a wide receiver at quarterback. They did get to play a wide receiver at quarterback with Lynn Bowden in Kentucky. Brian Mauer's making his first start for Tennessee. You go back to see, you know, Ian Book and Notre Dame. That's the best offense they've played. They controlled Notre Dame for the most part. Book 5.9 yards per attempt. So, you know, nothing really to write home about. But it was, you know, Cole Kmet, Notre Dame's tight end, 9 catches, 108 yards, and 1 touchdown. So you know Dan Mullen's going to try and scheme up ways for Kyle Pitts, you know, this big-time playmaker at tight end for Florida. In his career high 108 yards against LSU on 5 receptions there, and he has 30 receptions for 355 yards and 4 touchdowns in his last 6 games. So, you know, Kyle Pitts is good, the Gators' main target on offense, and with Georgia already struggling against the tight end earlier this year, you know, Mullen is going to try and scheme Kyle Pitts open. But, you know, if Georgia can cover him, but then they got 7 or 8 other receivers that they'll have to cover there. And Mark, I'm telling you, you know, I'll go down some numbers for you that Florida has compiled for the receivers so far this year. 8 different players with at least 150 receiving yards, and they're hitting big plays right now. Florida is one of 11 college football teams with 4 passing plays of 60-plus yards this season. 10 different Gators with a touchdown reception this year. That's tied for most among teams in college football. So, you know, if they can stop Kyle Pitts, Florida can still go 7-8 deep at receiver, getting Kadarius Toney back, their best playmaker at the position as well. So I will be interested to see, you know, how much Kyle Trask and this receiver core press the issue down the field. Not this dink and dunk, not this east-west stuff that Georgia's defense, the speed of their defense can stop. Press them down the field, and with Kyle Trask and what he's been able to do since taking over for Felipe Franks, I think Gator Nation can feel, you know, pretty good about that. You know, kind of going back and looking at his performance versus LSU.
If you love the game we love here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, lock it in right here. Like, comment, share the videos, and subscribe. If you love college football, the Florida Gators specifically, of course, but if you just love solid college football talk and you want to keep up with one of the top programs in the nation, check out David Waters and Gators Breakdown here on YouTube and on all the major audio platforms. So do we need to wait till later in the week for your prediction, or is that out, David? It's out.
Podcast Georgia preview released today, so about a whole 45 minutes worth there of talking Florida, Georgia. But I went with 27-24 Florida. I think they're going to limit DeAndre Swift. He's still going to get his yards. He's too good of a player not to. But as I said, Mark, I do think they get Jake Fromm in some favorable 3rd and long situations there. Florida's defense comes to play, put some pressure on Fromm, creates a turnover late, and that late turnover leads to a drive, and Florida gets out of Jacksonville with a win.
So my question is, what's your record on picking Gators games this year?
This year, I'm perfect because I picked them to lose versus LSU.
Okay,
so
that was
yeah,
my guess.
Yep. So for this season, I'm perfect for the Gators right now.
Good stuff, David. Appreciate you stopping by. Enjoy the game.
Thanks, Mark.